Hey guys, Eric with mobilemusthave.com, and today we're going to talk about DC powered options for Starlink high-performance dishes. There's a lot of stuff on the market. We've cut through most of the BS, done a bunch of testing, and have options for you to get your Starlink high-performance dish powered without using an inverter. Come along with us, and I'll tell you all about it. Now today's video is going to cover the Starlink high-performance fixed mount dish. Now that's the larger dish that is known because it can be mounted on a RV or marine application, has kind of a wedge mount to ensure water goes off of it, and is designed for in-motion use. If you're looking for DC power options for another dish like the standard Starlink dish, or the actuated dish, or the new mini dish that came out, hit the subscribe button and make sure to click that bell. We are going to be coming out most likely with some additional options for that as well. But today we're going to cover the HP dish. Now I installed my HP Starlink dish over a year ago, and it's been a game changer for me in the mobility space in terms of receiving mobile internet. I pair it with my cellular connections with my Peplink router, and that allows me to have Starlink but also be able to park under a tree. And because it's fixed mounted, I don't have to set up anything. It really is the perfect mobile internet solution. And again, subscribe because I'll do a video of my latest 2024-2025 internet setup, because it's been a few years since I did a full walkthrough of my setup. I can drive down the road using my HP dish. There's nothing to set up. I'm not going outside. I'm not running wires through slides or outdoors or tripping on them or any of that stuff that we see common with traditional Starlink users. I also, because I pair it with a Peplink router, which is a cellular enabled device, I plug my Starlink into the Peplink, and now I have cellular and I have Starlink, and they can be used at the exact same time by combining those connections, or one at a time, depending on how I want to use the internet. What that means is I can drive down the road, I can go under a bridge, I can park under an overpass, I can park my RV under a tree, my Starlink goes out, and I don't notice that the internet is out because it automatically fails over to cellular. Conversely, if I'm in a low cellular area and there's no cell signal, my Starlink takes over, or I'm able to use both at the same time, and it just means that I feel like I have reliable home internet use. One of the major disadvantages, in my opinion, about the Starlink kits in general is that they require AC power, the same power that comes out of a wall socket in a traditional home. Now, larger RVs, and most RVs actually nowadays, will come with inverters that will actually take power from a battery, a 12-volt battery, and step it up to wall power. That's fine and that can work, but your inverter has to be on in order to power your Starlink. And in our opinion, internet is something that sort of should be on all the time, especially if you walk away from your RV and you want to monitor stuff, or you've got, remote access to lock the doors or whatnot. You want to know that your internet is up even when you want to turn off your inverter to preserve some of the power in your house batteries. That's really why we feel that the Starlink needs to run on DC power in an optimal fashion for mobile use. In order to run the Starlink high-performance fixed mount dish on DC power, we have two different options that work for different use case scenarios. We'll call one of the kits the cut option, meaning you've got to cut your Starlink cable, and we'll explain why that might be something you want to do. And then our second option is the no-cut option, where you don't have to cut any of the factory Starlink cables to get your dish running on DC power. Before we talk about the various kits, we're going to kind of give you a summary of what to expect in terms of how you're going to wire this, regardless of which kit you pick. They have very similar wiring and setup instructions, other than that final cable that goes up to the dish. Now, the Starlink high-performance fixed mount dish uses or can use a lot of power, especially if it attempts to enable the snow melting feature on the dish. When that occurs, the dish can operate north of 250, it's actually 280 to about 300 watts of power when it peaks at its maximum power usage. Now, the dish doesn't typically use that much power, but it is why traditional kind of power over Ethernet solutions, like just plugging your Starlink into a PoE switch or something will not work. It's a technology that needs a lot more power than you see with traditional networking applications. Because of this, we need some beefier tech to get things going. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to have a step-up converter. And what that does is it steps up the power from your 12-volt batteries up to 48 to 56 volts, which is what the Starlink dish runs on, all DC power. If you're in a marine application or if you've wired your RV to run on 24 volts, you're in luck. Our DC step-up converters will run on either 12-volt input or 24-volt input and output the same required 56 volts for the dish to power on and operate in DC mode. One of the things you may notice that's different about the mobile must-have kit is we run our DC step-up converters at 56 volts, not at 48 volts. Just about everyone we've seen out there on the market is running a 48-volt step-up converter because, quite honestly, they're cheaper to buy and they're more readily available. We special order 56-volt converters because that's the upper range of the voltage that's accepted by all of the accessories here and by the dish. By going to the upper range of the voltage, we're ensuring more that if there is a longer run of cable or if there's a slight voltage dip for any reason, the dish isn't going to reboot itself and knock you off the internet. So we use a 56-volt step-up converter. Technically, you could use a 48-volt step-up converter, but the most important thing to note about these converters is they have to be of the correct wattage or amperage to operate properly. Now, a standard one that you might see on eBay for 15 bucks or something is probably going to be about 100 to 150 watts. And as we said before, this dish is going to operate 250 to 300 watts, so you want to be above that. Now, the converter that we've sourced is a 280 watt converter, and this works great with the Starlink HP fixed mount dish. I've been running this converter and this setup for over 3 months in my bus, and it's been working flawlessly. So it's a great setup that we've tested so that you don't have to. Now, as part of your purchase, you get detailed wiring diagrams and access to our support department if you have any questions. But at a high level, what you're doing is you're going from your 12 to 24 volt batteries to the input side of your power step-up converter, and then your 56 volts outputting to one of your Starlink adapters. We'll talk about that next. And then you're coming out of either the cut or the no-cut kit into the dish, and that's it. We'll also get into wire sizing and recommendations towards the end of this video, so make sure you stay tuned. But now that you understand what a step-up converter does, converting the voltage that your battery runs at to the voltage that your Starlink runs at, let's talk about the different options for how you can DC power that Starlink high-performance dish. Starting with the no-cut option, which you see here, there are 3 main components that come into the kit. First, you have what's called a PoE injector, and this is injecting power over Ethernet into a standard Ethernet cable. It's actually not standard. This is a category 8 cable. We'll get into that in a minute, but essentially all it means is it's very fat with a lot of copper inside of it that can transmit all of that power that the dish needs. And this cable does come included in the kit. Everything is labeled, as you can see here, and it shows you where you put your voltage input, your 56 volt input from this converter. And it will come right into these standard inputs down below. Now, this also has an integrated surge protection mechanism that will protect the equipment from surge as well by grounding right here with this ground screw down to the chassis ground in the RV or marine application. It's a nice touch there to protect everything in your kit. You're bringing your power input into this side, and then over here, your PoE is going to PoE, which is labeled to PoE on this adapter. Now, what this adapter is doing is it's converting your standard Ethernet cable port here, an RJ45 port, over to the Starlink cable that comes down from the roof on the HP dish. That's what this box does. The net effect is quite simple. You plug in these cables right here. Your PoE matches up to your PoE, as you see here. Down from here, that will go up to your Starlink dish. This is your power input from your DC step-up converter. And then here where it says LAN, that will go to the WAN port of your Peplink router, and you're off to the races running yourself on DC power. Now, it's important to note that DC powered kits like this are designed to work with third-party routers, typically like Peplink routers. This is usually a setup that's designed for someone who's going for a bit more of an advanced setup, but there are pretty entry-level routers from Peplink. The B1 is an example of one that's at a very low price point, sub $300 price point, and can give you the ability to combine multiple Starlink dishes, add cellular down the road, and a bunch of other options. The B1 5G is a little bit more money, but adds a 5G cellular modem, and then you can do all those things I talked about earlier, like combine Starlink and all that stuff. Now, why would anyone want to go with an option that required you to cut the cable in your Starlink dish, which obviously you can't return it and you can't uncut a cable? So honestly, the vast majority of folks are going to want to go with the no-cut kit. It's simple. You don't have to cut anything. You're off to the races and you can run DC powered. But the people that are going to be interested in the cut kit might be folks that are not going to be happy with the 75 plus feet of cable that is included in the Starlink dish high performance kit as of summer 2024. They've upped the length of that cable to accommodate certain customers, probably in larger yachts and other marine applications. But for van lifers and other folks in RV applications, all of a sudden you've got this massive cable that's about as thick as an old cable TV wire, like an RG6 cable for anyone over 30. And if you've got 30 plus feet of that that's bundled up somewhere because you didn't need it, it's just a lot of stuff to try and bury in a cabinet. That's really where the cut kit comes in. So what's included in the cut kit? Well, this box is virtually identical. I mean, it literally looks identical, other than the color of the anodized aluminum. What you're going to get here instead, you still have your LAN port here that's going to go out to the router, and you still have your PoE port here that's going to go up to your dish, but you're missing the adapter that's going to convert the cable end of this unit up to that dish. But in replacement of this, you're going to get this. Now, this is a Category 8 termination end. So once you cut the cable and you carefully remove the 8 pinned wires that are inside of it, you can actually open this up, and without any special tools, it's one of the kind of really cool things that we noticed in this kit, you can open this little adapter up and press down each of the wires on this punch down terminal that's inside of this kit. And then once you've got them into that area, you can lock them down with this little lock kit here that'll push them into locking into the terminals. Close this and complete yourself with your ring. This has got to go onto the cable before you assemble the entire thing. And the net effect, you take off this little safety cover here, is that you now have a standard Ethernet cable end with the correct pinouts to plug yourself right into the PoE input here to go straight up to the dish. So this is a way for you to get rid of all of that extra cable and still DC power your Starlink fixed mount roof dish. Whichever option you choose is really up to you. Both of these kits are available at mobilemusthave.com. We'll put links down below in the description, and you can kind of pick whichever one is best for your use case. But now we're going to go on and talk a little bit about kind of wiring considerations and how to get all this stuff working. Choosing the correct size wire can be confusing for folks, and it can be very confusing to understand how to wire all this stuff, especially in a way that can be super safe. Now, a big consideration in your installation is just how far from your battery bank, your house battery bank, are you going to be placing all this stuff? And as a general rule, you want to place this as close to your batteries as possible, while we understand that if your batteries are all the way at the bottom of the coach or boat and the dish is all the way at the top, you may have some challenges. So you kind of have to work it out based on the length of the cable and what your installation requirements are. I'm going to go with sort of a general worst case scenario of you being between 25 and 30 feet away from your battery banks where you're going to be installing that stuff. And as a result, I'm going to recommend some larger wire than you may be used to seeing at your kind of local, you know, auto parts store. Now this stuff, we don't sell wire at mobilemusthave.com, but I'll put links to where you can pick up some wire, the marine grade specific wire that we'll talk about in this video. And it's pretty inexpensive right now, so it's not going to break the bank too much depending on your installation requirements. But if your batteries and these boxes can be closer together and you can run more of that Starlink cable, that would be a better option, because the Starlink cable runs at that 56 volts, which is higher, which means it can go further on a thinner cable. All the other stuff in your kit is running at 12 volts or maximum 24 volts, so that's going to need thicker wire. The lower the voltage, the more resistance, the bigger the wire you need to prevent heat and a potential situation where you could put yourself in a dangerous situation where a wire is melting or something like that. So again, we're going to be talking about worst case scenario. Now for my installation, what I have done is I've run 8 gauge marine grade duplex wire. This is what you see here. This is actually 10 gauge. 10 is a little smaller than 8. I ran 8. So 8 gauge is a really good middle of the road size wire that'll let you go from your battery banks to a remote location up to about 30 feet and still give you enough power to run something like a Starlink High-Performance dish and a few other low consumption devices like a router or something else that wouldn't, take that much. A router typically is like 15 watts or something like that, so very little power. This little handy fuse box here we sell at mobilemusthave.com. This little clear cover comes off, and you'll see that there's positive terminals and negative terminals here, and then these are all positive and these are all negative for secondary branch circuits to come off of. So just giving you the high level, you'd come off your batteries, you'd go into, this is rated for 100 DC amps at 12 volts, so I'd likely put an 80 or 100 amp inline fuse on my 8 gauge wire right down by the battery. That's going to protect the wire all the way through the walls, and then I'm going to plug into this, and I've got my negative black wire here and my positive red wire here, and that is going to fire this guy up so that I can add secondary fuses from here off to things like my DC converter. So for my DC converter, I would do a 30 amp fuse at 12 volts. If I was running 24 volts, I would cut that in half because my voltage is higher, so my amperage is lower. You don't have to get crazy with all that, but that's how that works. So I'd run a 15 amp fuse if I had a 24 volt battery system, and that would go into the input on my converter here. Now that would allow me to then have 5 spaces available here for other stuff. So as you can see with pictures of my setup, I've got my router and other 12 volt things that are all running on this little fuse box. What I love about this is I also have red lights here that will pop on if it notices that one of my fuses is blown. That can be really handy. I also power cooling fans off of this. So if I've got like a warm cabinet, this just having a little load center, that's what these are kind of called, somewhere remote up where all of my tech stuff is, has been really helpful. And it's a very effective price point, especially if you're going to go through the hassle of running this cable anywhere far from your battery bank. Now, the Starlink HP dish requires a lot of power, and this DC converter can consume a lot of power with a maximum output of around 300 watts. And because of that, the manufacturer has included some power protection systems that have actually caused quite a few problems for folks on our channel who plug this thing in to like 11.9 or 12 volts and it doesn't turn on and they think it's broken. It's not broken, but it will not turn on unless it notices a minimum voltage of north of 12 volts. I'll put the specifics right here and note that it will also turn off if it notices a minimum voltage. So if you're going to install a DC system and you want it to work well and you want it to not create heat on these wires or a potential issue, you want to make sure that you have adequate batteries. You got to run healthy, good batteries, and you want to make sure that you're running adequate wire from those batteries to these accessories and properly fusing everything. As a final fail-safe, if you don't do that and you have too much voltage drop which will occur if your batteries are not healthy, if your batteries are decharged, or if you ran too small of a wire, this little guy won't turn on. And the reason for that is to protect you. It's to protect you and your kit. It also means that if something were to go, you're drawing down your batteries and that same battery is used to start your generator, this will turn off. It will also turn your Starlink off, but it will ensure that you don't come back to a fully stone dead battery because you forgot to turn off the Starlink kit. As mentioned before, we have full wiring diagrams on kind of how to set this up, how to set up the cut version, and inside of each of these kits you get a small wiring diagram that kind of gives you the overview of how that works as well. But we recommend check out our wiring diagrams that are included at support.mobilemusthave.com because you're going to get a lot more information there on how this should all be wired up. 3, 2, 1. As always, you can reach out to us at talk.mobilemusthave.com and schedule a consultation with one of our experts if you have any questions. You can reach out to us via chat at mobilemusthave.com. In the bottom right hand corner, you'll see a chat button that will let you speak to a live expert. And you can also just email us at info@mobilemusthave.com. And the phone number is on our website as well if you just want to call. But the talk.mobilemusthave.com is a great way to avoid hold times because we can schedule a mutually agreed time and then someone will give you a ring and you don't have to worry about being on hold or anything like that. So thank you guys so much for watching. We're excited to launch our DC powered solutions for the Starlink high performance dish, and we'll see you on the road.